In a faraway galaxy, there was a place where humans were no longer free. After the fall of Earth, many humans were taken by stronger alien races. They were sold in dark markets, used for hard work and treated like tools. One of these humans was a young man named Ethan. Ethan had been a miner for many years. He worked deep under the red surface of a desert planet called Xiron. His hands were always dirty, his back hurt every day. But even though he was tired, something in his eyes never gave up. He still had hope even in chains. The guards called him Unit 97. But Ethan still remembered his name, his dreams, and the way the sky looked back on Earth. At night, while others cried or stayed silent, Ethan looked at the stars. He told himself, "I'm more than a slave." One day everything changed. The guards brought the slaves to a new auction house. It was quieter than normal, colder and full of shadows. Aliens stood behind metal bars, watching like they were choosing meat. One by one, humans were sold, pushed, and taken away. Then it was Ethan's turn. He stood with his head high, even as they pulled him by chains. Most aliens didn't want him. He was too strong, too proud. They wanted ones who already gave up inside. Then a figure stepped forward. She wore a long black cloak with silver on the edges. Her face was partly hidden. Her eyes glowing deep violet. She said nothing, just stared at Ethan for a long time. Whispers started around her. "Isn't that Lady Valari, the widow from the North Hills? She hasn't bought anyone in years." She raised one hand and pointed. "I'll take him," she said in a low voice. The guards were confused. "Are you sure? This one is difficult." But she didn't answer again, only turned and walked away. They handed her the chain, and just like that, Ethan belonged to her. As they walked through the dusty streets, Ethan stayed silent. The alien woman didn't speak either, but her grip on the chain was gentle, not tight. After some time, she stopped and unlocked the chain. "You're not a dog," she said softly. "You may walk free in my home." Ethan looked at her, confused. "Why did you buy me?" he asked, but she just looked away and kept walking. Her house was large, old, and quiet. It was made of silver stone and had wide halls that echoed with every step. There were no other people, no guards, no servants, only silence. Valari showed him a room with a bed, soft sheets, and a small window. Ethan sat on the bed and felt something strange. It was comfort, something he had not felt in years. He stayed awake for a long time that night. The stars looked different from this window, but they still made him feel the same. Small but not alone. Why had she bought him? Why was she kind? Why did she live in this giant house all by herself? The next morning, she left food outside his door, fruit, bread, and warm tea in a strange cup. No words, no orders, just food over the next few days. Ethan walked around the house. There were paintings of a man and a child. Both smiling. Dust had covered everything. It was like no one had touched these things in years. He cleaned the halls, fixed broken lights, and watered old plants. He did it not because she told him to, but because he wanted to do something, anything, to repay the kindness he couldn't understand. Valari watched from far away. She said little, but sometimes her lips moved like she wanted to speak. One day, Ethan found a door that was locked. It had symbols on it and was colder than the rest of the house. Later that night, she came to him. Her face looked pale, her eyes darker than before. "Don't go near that room again," she said. Her voice was shaking. Ethan nodded, but he felt the weight of her pain. There was something in that room, something heavy. Not a monster, but maybe a memory. That night, as Ethan lay in his soft bed, he whispered to himself, "She freed me from chains. But I think she's still trapped in her own." And he wondered, what if she didn't buy me to help me? What if she bought me because she needed help too? Ethan woke up early. The sun on this alien planet was blue instead of yellow. Its light came through the window like soft water. The house was silent but not empty. It was full of memories, hiding in corners, waiting in shadows. He walked out of his room and looked around. The halls were wide and clean now, thanks to his work, but the air still felt heavy. Like someone was always watching. He could feel something strange. Like invisible eyes on his back. Lady Valari was already awake. Standing near a tall window, she didn't look at him. But she knew he was there. She always knew. She said nothing. He said nothing. They both stood in silence, like two statues made of pain. Ethan began to clean a room he hadn't touched yet. It was filled with old books written in alien symbols. Dust danced in the light as he moved. He picked up one book and sneezed. It made him laugh quietly. And for a moment the house felt alive. Valari passed by the doorway and stopped. She watched him for a second, then spoke without turning her head. "That room belonged to my husband," she said. Ethan froze, the book still in his hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But she was already walking away. Ethan wanted to ask questions. But her silence was like a wall made of ice. So he worked quietly, room by room, day by day. He found more paintings. One of a smiling boy with bright silver eyes. Another of Valari with a younger face standing beside a tall man. In every picture they were happy. Now, only the frames remained, covered in time. One day, while sweeping the back hallway, Ethan found something strange. There was a door covered by a curtain, half hidden behind a fallen shelf. He moved the shelf and pulled the curtain aside. A metal door stood there, locked with symbols glowing red. It didn't look like the others. This door had pain in it, like it was guarding something broken. Ethan gently touched the lock, and suddenly, a small spark shocked his hand. He stepped back quickly, his heart beating fast. At that moment, Valari's voice came from behind him. "Do not open that," she said firmly. Ethan turned and saw her eyes full of warning. "That room is not for you." "I didn't mean to find it," he said. Valari nodded slowly, her voice softer now. "It was my son's room," she whispered. "He died during the war." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had seen death before, on Earth, in the mines, on alien ships, but this pain was different. This was a mother's pain, silent and endless. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Valari nodded once and turned away. She walked slowly, like every step was heavier than the last. After that day, Ethan didn't go near that door again, but he felt it like it was always behind him. A room full of ghosts and love that had no place to go. To lighten the air, Ethan started doing small things. He cooked strange meals from human memory using alien fruits. He repaired a broken chair with string and wood. He even drew small pictures of Earth animals and left them on the walls. Valari noticed, though she never said it, one evening. She walked into the kitchen while he was roasting sweet roots. She sat down at the table and looked at the fire. "You remind me of him," she said suddenly. Ethan looked up, confused. "My son," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He used to cook strange things too." For the first time, Ethan saw her not as an alien, not as a rich widow, but as a mother who lost everything but still breathed, still walked, still gave food to someone like him. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. His voice gentle. Valari nodded but said nothing more. She stood and left, but something in the air had changed. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He stared at the stars through his window. He thought about chains. Not the ones on hands, but the ones on hearts. Valari had no chains on her wrists. But her soul was still tied to that locked room, to memories she couldn't let go. And Ethan, once just a slave, now felt something inside him growing. Not just freedom, but purpose. He wasn't just here to be safe, maybe. He was here to help her heal. But how do you help someone who doesn't want to be helped? He didn't know yet, but he promised himself. He would find a way, even if it meant opening doors without keys, or speaking words that had been buried for years. The days on Cyron grew warmer. The blue sun rose higher and stayed longer in the sky. Ethan had cleaned most of the big house by now, but the silence still lived in its corners like a quiet ghost. Valari said little, but she watched him more often now. Sometimes from the window, sometimes from the shadows of the hallway. She never smiled, but her eyes didn't look as cold as before. There was a softness returning to her face little by little. One morning, Ethan stepped outside into the back courtyard. It was a dead space full of dry sand and sharp stones, but near the center was a round patch of soil, cracked and untouched. He knelt beside it and ran his fingers through the earth. "It's not dead," he whispered to himself. He remembered how his mother used to plant herbs near the window back on Earth. She said, "Where green things grow, hope follows." Ethan missed that hope. He went back into the house and asked Valari, "Do you mind if I grow something in the back?" She looked at him with a curious face. "There is nothing here that will grow," she said. "Let me try," he replied after a pause. She gave a quiet nod. That day, Ethan walked to the market. He traded a broken device he had fixed for seeds, alien seeds in glowing colors. The shopkeeper laughed. "No one buys these anymore." "They need care," Ethan said. "I'll give them that." Back at the house, he dug the soil slowly. He planted each seed with care, Using water, he carried himself each day he worked in the garden. Even when the sun burned his neck, Valari watched from the window, her face unreadable. One evening, Ethan hummed a song while watering the tiny sprouts. The sound of his voice drifted into the house like a soft breeze. Valari stood behind the curtains, listening. Something deep in her chest moved, like an old door opening just a little that night. Ethan made a small meal and placed an extra plate at the table. Valari came and sat down silently. They ate together, no words, but something passed between them, not friendship yet. Not love, but peace, a beginning. Over the next few days, the plants began to grow. Tiny green leaves broke through the soil. Ethan smiled as he touched them, feeling life return to the dead earth. "Look," he said one evening. "They're growing." Valari stood beside him. Silent, then she spoke. "My son planted something here once. When he was small." Ethan looked at her gently. "What happened?" She took a deep breath. "He was taken during the last wave of war," she said. "I never found his body." "I planted nothing after that," Ethan didn't reply. But his silence was full of respect. Valari turned to go back inside. But before she walked away, she said, "Thank you." That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he felt something shift. The chains that once held his body were gone now. He was breaking the invisible chains around her heart. But peace never stays long, especially in a galaxy still burning with power and pride. 3 nights later, as the moon shone pale and quiet, masked figures crept into the garden. They wore dark robes and moved like shadows. One stepped on a plant and crushed it under his boot. Ethan woke with a feeling. Something was wrong. He grabbed a stick and moved silently toward the back. He saw them, 4 intruders, their weapons glowing blue. Valari stood in front of the garden, unarmed but unafraid. "I warned your kind," one said. "You were given a chance to return to the council." "She's not alone," Ethan shouted. Stepping forward, they laughed. "A human slave? You'll die for nothing." But Ethan did not run. The first attacker lunged forward. Ethan blocked the strike with his stick and hit back with all his strength. The fight was short but wild. Shovels, stones, fists, and fire. Ethan bled, but he didn't fall. He protected Valari like a shield at last. Valari raised her hands and released a wave of energy from her palms. The attackers fell back, stunned, and ran into the night. The house was safe again. But the garden was torn, and Ethan had a deep cut across his shoulder. Valari held him as he sank to his knees. She placed her glowing hands on his wound. The pain faded slowly, replaced by warmth. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Why did you do that?" Ethan looked up at her, weak but calm. "Because you gave me a bed, not a cage," he said. "You gave me a home." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said something he never expected. "You are not my slave," she whispered. "You are my light in this silence." The garden healed slowly. The broken plants stood tall again. Thanks to Ethan's hands, new flowers began to bloom, bright and strange in color. But the biggest change was not in the soil. It was inside the house and inside Valari's heart. Valari had always walked like a ghost, silent, careful, as if she was afraid of making noise. Now her steps were firmer. She even stood beside Ethan while he worked. Sometimes she asked questions, sometimes she just listened to his stories about Earth. Ethan told her about rain, about children playing in the mud, about music that made no sense but made people laugh. Valari listened with quiet wonder, her eyes softening more each day. One morning, Ethan found an old music box in a dusty cabinet. It was alien-made, shaped like a silver moon. When he opened it, soft notes floated into the room. The melody was slow, gentle, and sad. He placed it on the kitchen table while cooking. Valari entered and froze when she heard the tune. "That song," she said, her voice low. "My husband used to play it every night for our son." Ethan looked at her and closed the box slowly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "No," she said after a pause. "Please, play it again." He opened the music box once more, and she sat down quietly, hands in her lap. The sound filled the air like warm wind after a storm. Later that evening, Ethan lit soft candles in the hallway. He had cleared the floor, swept it clean. He smiled at Valari and said, "My mother taught me to dance in the kitchen back on Earth. I stepped on her feet a lot." He laughed. Valari raised an eyebrow. "Is this a lesson?" "Only if you want it to be," he said, gently offering his hand. For a moment she hesitated. Then she placed her hand in his. It was cold at first, but slowly warmed. He guided her in small steps, right foot, left foot, turned slowly. The music from the box played again, and the candles flickered. They didn't speak. Their feet moved slowly, carefully, like a soft language between them. Valari's long cloak brushed the floor. Ethan's shirt still had old stains, but in that moment, they looked like stars learning how to orbit each other. After a few turns, she stepped back and laughed. It was light and sudden like a bell. Ethan stared in shock. "You laughed," he said. "Yes," she smiled. "I forgot how." Then her face turned quiet again. "But this joy feels strange," she whispered. "It feels like I'm stealing it from the past." Ethan stepped closer. "You're not stealing," he said. "You're remembering who you were before the pain." She looked down at their hands, still touching. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said. "You're someone learning to live again," Ethan replied. The next morning, Valari cooked for the first time in years. The food was strange: blue eggs, soft black bread, and sweet red sauce. Ethan smiled and ate every bite. "This is better than Earth food," he joked. "You're lying," she said, but her eyes sparkled. They spent more time together, reading books, walking in the garden. She even showed him how to write in her language. Ethan showed her how to throw a small ball made of thread. It was silly, but she laughed when she missed and dropped it. They were learning how to be human and alien together, not as master and servant, but as something new, something fragile, something beautiful, but still. Valari never opened the door to her son's room. Every time she passed it, her hand paused in the air. Ethan never pushed. He knew some doors needed to open on their own. One night, Ethan was sitting outside, looking at the stars. Valari came beside him with a blanket. She wrapped it around his shoulders and sat next to him. "Do you still miss Earth?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "but I don't feel lost anymore." "I used to feel lost in this house too," she said. "Now I feel found." Ethan looked at her, the stars reflected in her violet eyes. "You saved me," he said. "No," she whispered. "You reminded me I was still alive." A warm wind blew through the garden. The flowers swayed like they were listening. The music box played softly inside the house, and two broken souls sat close, not healed, not whole, but dancing slowly toward something like love. The flowers in the garden grew taller. Laughter returned to the house. Soft but real, Valari smiled more. Ethan felt stronger. They cooked together, worked together, and sometimes just sat in silence, comfortably. But peace in a galaxy ruled by pride never lasts long. Far from their quiet home, rumors had started, nobles whispered. The widow Valari keeps a human in her house. She treats him like an equal. She dares to care for him. And in the high towers of the Jireen court, these whispers turned to warnings one morning. Two guards in black armor knocked at Valari's gate. They did not bow. They handed her a sealed letter with the royal mark. She opened it with calm hands, but her face turned pale. She folded the letter without a word and turned to Ethan. "I must go to the capital," she said. "Why?" Ethan asked, his voice full of concern. "The council wishes to speak with me," she replied. "It's about you." Ethan stood still. "I'll go with you," he said without thinking. "No," Valari said firmly. "They will not accept your presence." "And then don't go," he said. "I must," she whispered, "or they will send someone worse." That evening, she wore her formal robes. Dark blue with golden lines, she looked like a queen before leaving. She placed her hand on Ethan's chest. "Whatever they say," she whispered, "remember this place is still ours." Then she stepped into the transport and disappeared into the sky. The capital was tall, cold, and filled with sharp eyes. The council sat on silver thrones, unmoved, untouched by time. Valari stood before them, alone but proud. "You have broken tradition," said one elder. "You shelter a human," said another. "I freed him," Valari replied. "And he saved my life." A third elder leaned forward. "Do you love him?" he asked. Valari paused. "I am learning how," she said. The court gasped. Love between a Zerine widow and a human slave was unthinkable. "You bring shame to your family line," one hissed. "You will be stripped of your lands," another warned. But Valari stood strong. "I have followed your rules for years," she said, "and it only brought me pain. This human brought light back into my home." The elders looked at one another. Finally, the high voice of the council spoke. "Return to your home," he said, "but understand this. If the human is not gone within 7 days, we will come for him." Valari did not reply. She bowed once and walked out, her heart burning with quiet rage. Back at home, Ethan waited in the garden. When Valari returned, he knew something was wrong. "What did they say?" he asked. She sat down beside him, tired and silent. "They gave me 7 days," she said. 7 days to remove you from my home." Ethan's face hardened. "I'll go," he said. "No," she replied instantly. "You'll lose everything," he said. "I already lost everything," she whispered. "Then I found you." He looked at her, pain in his eyes. "You can't fight a council," he said. "I'm not afraid of them anymore," she said. "But I am," Ethan whispered. "I don't want to be the reason you suffer again." Valari stood and looked at the stars. She spoke slowly. "I was a widow who walked among ghosts. You gave me a garden, music, laughter. I would rather lose my title than lose that again." Ethan wanted to hold her, but fear held him back. He walked to his room that night and packed his small bag. But before he could leave, Valari was waiting at the door. "I told you," she said, "you're not leaving." The next morning, the garden was quiet again, no music, no laughter, just waiting. Valari made a call to the council. "If you want him gone," she said, "come take him yourself." Ethan looked at her in shock. "They'll hurt you," he said. She turned to him with fire in her voice. "Let them try, for the first time." Ethan saw her as more than just a widow. She was a warrior, a protector, a woman who had lost everything but refused to lose again. The days passed slowly. Each morning, they waited. Each night they stayed close. Valari sharpened old blades hidden in her basement. Ethan trained with a wooden staff, even though he had never fought in a war. And then on the 7th day the sky turned dark. Ships appeared above the garden. Valari stood at the gate. Ethan beside her. No chains, no fear. Just two souls ready to fight for their home. The ships hovered like angry clouds above the house. Their engines hummed with quiet threat. Serene soldiers in silver armor began to land near the garden. Their boots crushed flowers, their eyes cold and ready. Ethan stood tall beside Valari. He had no armor, no fancy weapons. Just a wooden staff, a beating heart, and a reason to protect. Valari wore her old family armor, dark silver with glowing lines. Her eyes burned like stars about to fall. The lead soldier stepped forward and read from a scroll. "By the order of the Zirine Council," he began, "the human must be removed, and the lady must submit." Valari raised her hand and said,
"No!" The soldiers froze for a second, then one of them laughed.
"You would break your people's law for a slave?" Valari's voice was clear. "He is no slave. He is the one who reminded me how to live." The commander's eyes narrowed. "If you do not obey," he said, "we will use force." Ethan looked at Valari. He whispered, "Let me go. They'll stop if I leave." Valari shook her head slowly. "I didn't fight to live again just to lose you." Before the fight could begin, a loud voice echoed through the air. "Wait!" it called. Everyone turned. An older Zirine in golden robes stepped down from a second ship. His face was lined with age. His eyes sharp like a blade. It was High Counselor Velith, brother of Valari's late husband. "I asked the council to let me come," he said. Valari stepped back in surprise. "You?" "I had to see it with my own eyes," he said. This human who made the widow of fire smile again. He walked slowly, studying Ethan. "You have no power," he said. "No bloodline, no armor." Ethan stayed silent. "But you stood beside her when we all left her in the dark." Then Velith turned to the soldiers. "Lower your weapons," he ordered. The soldiers obeyed, confused but loyal. The garden grew silent again. Only the wind spoke. Velith looked at Valari. "The council will not allow this bond without proof," he said. "Then what do you want?" she asked. "Let the human speak to our people," he replied. "Let him prove he is not a pet, not a toy, not a threat. Let him show them what he means to you." Ethan stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said. Valari looked at him with wide eyes. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "If we run now, they'll never understand." The next day, the plaza was full. Shireen from all districts gathered. They wore fine clothes, their expressions curious, suspicious. Ethan stood on the speaking platform with Valari beside him. The music box played softly in the background. The same song her son loved. Ethan took a deep breath. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. "My name is Ethan," he said. "I was taken from my world and made to work in the dark. I forgot what kindness looked like, until Valari gave it to me." He looked out at the crowd. "I was a slave in chains, but she gave me a bed, a meal, a name again. She didn't fix me with magic. She healed me with silence. With space, with slow kindness, Valerie listened quietly, her eyes full of tears. I didn't fall in love with her because she is powerful, Ethan continued. I fell in love with her because she is broken like me. And still, she tries to smile. The crowd was silent. Even the guards looked unsure. Ethan stepped back. I am not asking to be a prince, he said. I am only asking to be allowed to stay to grow flowers. To dance with her in the hallway again, High Counselor Veleth stepped forward. He raised his hand and turned to the people. I have seen war, he said, and I have seen peace, and what they have is not weakness, it is courage. A murmur grew in the crowd, soft at first, then stronger. One noble stepped forward and bowed his head. Then another and another. The people had spoken. The council could not deny the will of the crowd. Valerie was no longer alone. Ethan was no longer unwanted. The bond between human and Zyrene had changed something deep in the stars. That night, Valerie and Ethan sat in the garden under the glowing moon. You were brave, she said. So were you, he replied. She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in years, she whispered, I feel free. Ethan took her hand gently. And for the first time, he said, I feel like I belong. The stars above Xiron shined brighter than usual, or maybe the world simply felt brighter. For the first time in years, Valarie's house echoed with life. Laughter filled the garden. Light flowed through the windows, and Ethan walked with pride, no longer hiding in the shadows. The council did not take back their threats, but they said nothing more. The people had spoken. And power, even old power, sometimes had to listen to hearts instead of laws. High Counselor Veleth sent a private message to Valerie. I still do not understand your bond, he wrote, but I respect it. That may be enough for now, Valerie replied with only 2 words. Thank you. Back at the house, Ethan and Valerie began rebuilding. Not walls or weapons, but trust, safety, and something much harder. Hope. They opened the front gate for the first time in years. Neighbors came by, some curious, some kind, some still afraid. Valerie welcomed them all with tea and soft words. Ethan told stories about Earth, funny ones, sad ones, and slowly, the line between alien and human started to blur. One evening, children from nearby homes played near the garden. They chased glowing insects and laughed like bells. Ethan sat with Valerie on the stone bench, watching them. You see that? He asked. That's the sound of peace, Valerie nodded. I never thought my home would hear that again, she said. It's because you let someone in, Ethan replied. She turned to him with a soft smile. No, she whispered. It's because you stayed later that night. Ethan walked alone to the once locked room. He stood before the door and placed his hand gently on it. Valerie appeared behind him, quiet as moonlight. I haven't opened it since the day he left, she said. Ethan looked at her with care in his eyes. You don't have to, he said. I want to, she whispered. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the door. The door creaked open slowly. Inside, the room was filled with silence and dust. Toys lay untouched. Small shoes sat near the bed. A drawing hung on the wall. 3 figures holding hands. A mother, a father, and a child. Valerie stepped inside and knelt by the bed. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Ethan stayed at the doorway, giving her space. She picked up a tiny toy ship and held it close to her chest. I thought if I opened this door I'd fall apart, she said. But I didn't. You're stronger now, Ethan said softly. No, she whispered. I'm not alone now. The next day, Valerie gave the room new life. She cleaned the dust, opened the windows. She didn't turn it into a shrine or try to forget. She made it part of the house again. A room of memory, not just of mourning. Ethan started a small school under the tree near the garden. He taught human words to alien children, and they taught him how to draw stars in Zyrene style. They laughed at his strange Earth songs and asked him again and again to tell stories about blue oceans. Valerie watched them from the porch, her eyes no longer full of shadows. One child ran to her one afternoon and hugged her leg. Is it true? The girl asked. Did you fall in love with a human? Valerie smiled and looked at Ethan. Yes, she said. And it saved my life. Word of their story spread beyond the city. Other planets sent messages, some with interest, some with fear, but many with curiosity. Could peace truly begin with one home? Could love truly change an old world? Months passed. The garden became a place of songs and stars. The once quiet house became a symbol, not of power, but of healing, of choosing love over control, of saying yes when the whole world expected no. One evening, under a sky full of twin moons, Ethan stood before Valari. His hands shook, but not from fear, from something deeper. "I have nothing to give you," he said. "No gold, no titles." Valari placed her hand over his heart. "You already gave me something no one else could," she whispered. "What's that?" "A reason to open the door." He smiled and took a deep breath. Then, "May I stay by your side, always?" Valari leaned in close, her voice like falling starlight. "You already do." And as the wind moved gently through the flowers, and the lights from the house glowed warm and welcoming, a human and an alien widow stood side by side, not just as lovers, not just as survivors, but as proof that even in a galaxy full of war and rules and fear, two broken souls can still find each other and build a new beginning, not just for themselves, but for two worlds.